So it turns out all 34 counts are based on the payoff scheme that Michael Cohen was a part of, paying off Stormy Daniels. There's nothing else in those counts except that scheme. Did you expect any other criminal elements in this indictment other than the Stormy Daniels payoff scheme?
No, since Michael testified publicly to tens of millions of people and started out by saying he did Donald Trump's dirty deeds, he lied, he did a lot of things he was ashamed of, he was sorry, he didn't expect forgiveness. Now for his wife and his family, he was going to tell the truth. And the first thing that I discovered the night that we gave him what you would know in the Congress, Lawrence, as a murder board, which is to put a witness through some very tough questions, I asked him, where are the checks that you were written by the Trump organization? I didn't know that a sitting president wrote checks. And when Michael said, oh, I have copies of them at home, and I said, oh, my God, it's 10 o'clock at night. You're testifying tomorrow morning. Get me a copy of those checks. He had his wife send a couple of checks signed by Donald Trump. I looked at the date. He's president of the United States in the Oval Office writing checks. And then Rudy Giuliani made one mistake. He actually told the truth, and he went, oops, they were reimbursements. They weren't legal fees. This is after they were always described on the books as legal fees, according to Michael. Well, wait a minute. The President of the United States is reimbursing for a crime that Michael Cohen was sent to prison for, that the federal prosecutors working for Trump said Donald Trump, quote, directed Michael to do. So I have three things, if you want me to continue, just...
Go ahead, Lenny. Please go ahead.
Well, just three things. I would like everybody to read this indictment, because I'm not talking from inside knowledge. I'm talking as a lawyer. One, follow the money. Follow the money from all the president's men. Follow the money, the checks. A sitting president wrote those checks. Secondly, follow the facts. Read the indictment. Underline the facts asserted. And ask yourself, who's going to confirm those facts? Whoa, I didn't realize there's plenty of corroboration, plenty of witnesses, maybe people who flipped, I don't know, but follow the facts in the indictment. And the third, most importantly, which is a little ironic to me, follow the crime. So now we hear the defense counsel saying, oh, it wasn't a state crime. We're going to move to dismiss. Well, wait a minute. So it was a federal crime that sent Michael Cohen to prison. So this is a great defense. Our client committed a federal crime, but not a state crime. That's the way I analyze this indictment, and I'm not speaking from inside knowledge. And I honor the judge's request that people like me, not just Michael, refrain from commenting on the evidence until we see it presented in front of a jury.
You know, I was going to get to that in a moment, but let's do it right now.
Okay.
So Michael Cohen, your name didn't come up today, but Michael Cohen's name came up by the Trump lawyers in defense. This was in defense of the prosecutors pointing out to the judge that Donald Trump has issued homicidally threatening imagery of him with a baseball bat slamming into Alvin Bragg. Donald Trump has attacked Alvin Bragg. The district attorney's wife, which has never happened in history, attacked the judge, which the judge, I'm sure, already knew about. And on and on, all of these things that Donald Trump has said publicly that no one's ever said about their prosecutors or their judges in any criminal case ever anywhere. And their defense, the Trump lawyer defense, was Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen, every time he talks to the grand jury, every time he talked to the prosecutors, he would go out on the sidewalk and you'd be there with him. And Michael Cohen would then tell us in the public what he had told the grand jury, which I just want to say is a qualitatively different thing. It's a different thing. Michael Cohen did not walk out on the sidewalk and threaten people. But anyway, Michael Cohen was used.
It's also false.
OK, but that's how Michael Cohen was used today in the courtroom. And the prosecutor said, we have tried to clamp down. That was the phrase he used, clamp down on our witnesses, but there's only so much we can do.
Yes, and fair enough. And certainly they did ask both of us to minimize any media appearances. But in my view, when somebody's character and credibility is being attacked and personal accusations are being used, Donald Trump called Michael Cohen a rat after he came to me and dedicated the rest of his life to telling the truth to power. and he was called a rat before he went to prison, that can be a death sentence, or certainly a threat to your life and limb if you're in prison to be called a rat. So Michael Cohen was attacked every night, and a lot of times by talking heads who had no idea what they were talking about, speculating and then attacking Michael. I feel obligated, and always have, Lawrence, as you know me, to protect my client's reputation in the media. If the client is being smeared, and family and home and hearth need to be defended by lawyers in the media if they're being attacked. Michael Cohen has been defending himself from these attacks, which he does not deny, for the 10 years that he worked for Donald Trump. He said it in front of tens of millions of people. I lied for Donald Trump. Now I want to turn my life around. And the attacks on him never finished the sentence. He did almost all the things he pled guilty to on behalf of, for the benefit of, Donald Trump. He didn't have the alleged affairs. He didn't pay the money to hush up because he was running for president and didn't want the American people to know about the alleged affairs. Michael Cohen did it for Donald Trump because he had sold his soul to Donald Trump. And that's not me. That's what he said to the American people and really streaming around the globe. So the personal attacks on him, I have to now try to be cautious myself. I don't want to offend the judge. He's absolutely right. Lawyers and people in the courtroom, now that we have a jury, it's due process. Donald Trump's presumed innocent until proven guilty. We've got to be careful. But I am going to defend his credibility because I know how he's turned his life around. And ever since, he's been substantiated and corroborated in every way possible, including the documents and emails and text messages that we saw when we were with the prosecutors the last few months.